After my son and his wife humiliated me in front of their wealthy guests, my son turned on speakerphone and called a care facility. "Come get this useless old man. I'm done taking care of him," he said loudly for everyone to hear. Then he threw my bag onto the driveway and ordered me to leave. I stayed silent as they walked away. Minutes later, 6 black luxury cars rolled down our quiet street and stopped outside the house. My son's face turned pale. "I'm truly grateful to have you here at Dad Returns. Which city or country are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments." Note: this narrative features fictional elements for entertainment and learning. Any similarity to actual persons or locations is purely coincidental, but its underlying message is worth taking to heart. My name is Sterling Vance, and for 15 years I woke up before the sun did. Not because I had to. Not because anyone in this house expected it. But because those quiet hours when the neighborhood was still dark and the only sound was the sprinkler system clicking on across the street were the only hours that truly belonged to me. I pulled on my worn canvas work gloves and stepped out through the side door into the backyard. The September air in Naperville carried that particular sharpness that comes just before autumn fully arrives. Cool enough to remind you that summer is finished, warm enough to make you forget for a moment. The kind of morning that Margaret used to call the world holding its breath. I reached for the hedge clippers hanging on the garden wall and got to work on the boxwood hedges along the back fence. They didn't need trimming. They'd been trimmed 4 days ago. But my hands needed something to do, and this yard and this beautiful, meticulously landscaped yard that strangers drove slowly past just to admire gave my hands purpose. "You tracked dirt across the foyer again yesterday." I didn't turn around. I recognized the voice the way you recognize a sound that has stopped surprising you, the way you stop flinching at a door that always slams. Sienna stood on the back porch, in a cream-colored silk robe, one hand wrapped around a coffee mug that probably cost more than most people's car payments, the other hand scrolling through her phone without looking up. Her hair was perfectly arranged even at this hour. I had always wondered whether she slept that way. "Sure, I'll wipe it down before breakfast," I said. "I just had those floors repolished." She finally glanced up, not at me, at the hedges, the way someone inspects work they've already decided is inadequate. "The people who did it charged $400 an hour. I'd appreciate it if you'd remember that." She turned and walked back inside without waiting for my response. The sliding glass door closed behind her with a soft, expensive click. I exhaled slowly and turned back to the hedges. My chest didn't tighten the way it used to. That, I suppose, was either personal growth or something more troubling. The kind of numbness that settles in after years of being treated like furniture that occasionally gets in the way. I thought about Margaret then. I always did on mornings like this. She had been gone for 16 years, but I still reached into my breast pocket sometimes. Automatically, the way you reach for your phone, and found the small photograph I kept folded there. Her face at 52, laughing at something I'd said at a restaurant in downtown Cleveland. She never laughed quietly. She threw her whole body into it, shoulders lifting, eyes disappearing into the creases at their corners. "Sterling," she used to say, "you have a gift for finding the most ridiculous things genuinely funny. It's one of the reasons I haven't left you." My chest ached, sharp and specific, like a splinter buried too deep to reach. I heard Julian's car before I saw him. The low electric hum of the Tesla pulling out of the garage door rolling down in its smooth, automated way. Through the gap in the hedge, I caught a glimpse of him, dark suit, earpiece already in coffee cup, in the other hand eyes on his phone. He didn't look toward the garden. He hadn't in longer than I could remember. When Julian was 9 years old, he used to follow me into the garden on Saturday mornings and pepper me with questions about everything: why leaves changed color, why worms came up after rain, whether our neighbor's dog understood English or just pretended to. He talked constantly, that boy. The whole world fascinated him. I set the hedge clippers down and looked at the empty driveway where his car had been. 42 years old now. Vice president of a private investment fund. A man who wore his ambition like a second skin, who measured every room he walked into and calculated exactly how impressive he appeared standing in it. I walked to the garden spigot and rinsed the dirt from my gloves. The morning was fully bright now, the neighborhood coming alive, a jogger passing on the sidewalk, a sprinkler arcing across the lawn, 2 houses down, the distant bark of a dog. I looked up at the window of the attic. 3rd floor northeast corner. From down here it looked like exactly what everyone assumed. It was a storage space, dim and neglected, the kind of place a family shoves things they can't bear to throw away, but don't want to look at either. Nobody ever asked what was behind that window. And tonight, for the very first time in 15 years, I found myself wondering whether the answer to that question was about to become impossible to keep quiet. I pulled the small photograph of Margaret from my pocket and looked at her face one more time. "Not yet," I told her quietly. "But soon." I folded the photograph back into my pocket and walked inside. The attic stairs creaked on the 4th step. They always had. In 15 years, I had never fixed them. Julian's contractors had offered twice. "We can sort that out when we redo the 3rd floor, Mr. Vance." I always told them not to bother. That creak was useful. It was the only alarm system the attic had. I stepped over it from memory, my hand barely touching the railing, and pushed open the door at the top. From the outside, the room was storage. Cardboard boxes stacked against one wall, an old drop cloth covering something bulky in the corner, bare wooden rafters, a single bulb on a pull chain. That was what anyone who opened this door, which no one ever did, would see. What they would not see, the false back panel behind the 2nd row of boxes. And behind that panel, a room the size of a generous home office. 3 monitors, a dedicated fiber line routed through the house's original construction. Wiring a secure phone system and enough processing power to manage the daily operations of a logistics and maritime company, with assets across 14 countries. I sat down in the chair, the same chair I'd used for 15 years, leather worn smooth at the armrests, and pressed the power switch. The monitors came to life in sequence. Shipping manifests from Rotterdam. Port Authority updates from Houston. An overnight message from our operations director in Singapore flagged routine. A video call connected automatically. Gideon Clark appeared on the center screen, already at his desk in the downtown Chicago office jacket, on reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He had been with me for 23 years. He was in every practical sense the person who kept Vance Global running on the days when I was busy trimming hedges that didn't need trimming. "Good morning, sir," Gideon said. His voice carried the particular steadiness of a man who has learned that the best response to unusual circumstances is no response at all. It was a quality I had always valued in him. "Good morning, Gideon." I pulled up the overnight summary on the left monitor. The Montgomery confirmation had received at 11:47 last night. He straightened slightly. "Mrs. Vivian Montgomery has confirmed she will attend Saturday's event. Her office confirmed 2 things. Specifically, she will arrive on time, and she will arrive alone." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly. More like the particular satisfaction of watching a long-anticipated piece move into position. "Good," I said. "Let her come." Gideon studied me for a moment, with the expression of a man who has learned not to ask questions he already suspects the answers to. "Will there be anything else regarding Saturday, sir?" "Not yet." He nodded and moved on to the operational summary. I half listened, my eyes drifting to the framed photograph on the corner of the desk, Margaret Younger here, standing on the deck of a shipping vessel in the port of Chicago, squinting against the lake wind, laughing again. Always laughing. The memory arrived the way it always did, not gently. 16 years ago, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and cut flowers, Margaret had reached for my hand, with a grip that was still surprisingly strong for someone who had already decided she was finished fighting. Her eyes were clear that last week, clearer somehow than they had been in years. Sterling. Her thumb moved across my knuckles. Promise me something. Anything. Don't let Julian know about the money. Her voice was steady, deliberate. Not yet. Not for a long time. Her eyes held mine. Wealth will turn him into someone neither of us would recognize. He needs to build himself first. Build something real, something that belongs to him, not to the Vance name. My throat had been too tight to speak. I had nodded. Promise me, she said again. I promise, I told her. I promise Margaret. I had kept that promise for 15 years. Through every condescending comment from Sienna. Through every dinner Julian attended without looking up from his phone. Through every morning I trimmed hedges that didn't need trimming and carried grocery bags that weren't heavy, and ate breakfast alone at a small table in a corner of a kitchen that could have seated 12. Sir. Gideon's voice pulled me back. His expression had shifted, careful, deliberate. One additional item. Julian's office called again this morning regarding Saturday's foundation event. Third request this month. My jaw tightened. Requesting seats. 2 seats, yes. His assistant indicated that Mr. Julian feels the event would be an important networking opportunity. The foundation event. The annual gala benefiting the Margaret Vance Education Fund, a ceremony honoring my wife's name, attended by the most significant philanthropic leaders in the Midwest. Julian had been trying to get into that room for 3 months, not because he cared about education funding, because the room was worth being seen in. I pressed my back teeth together until I felt the pressure in my jaw. Gideon. My voice came out quieter than I intended, and somehow that made it heavier. The answer is still no. Gideon held my gaze. Understood, sir. I reached out and ended the video call. The screen went dark. The attic was very quiet. Outside the small window, I could hear the distant sound of a leaf blower from somewhere down the block, and below that, the faint sound of Sienna's voice on the phone, bright and performative, the voice she used when she was being recorded or photographed, or simply when she wanted someone to believe she was doing exceptionally well. I looked at the photograph of Margaret. He called again, I told her. My voice came out rough at the edges the way it always did when I talked to her in this room. He wants a seat at your table. Not because of you, because of who else will be sitting there. My hand found the edge of the desk and gripped it, knuckles pressing white against the worn wood. I don't know how much longer I can do this, I admitted. But I'm not done yet. I pulled up the calendar on the right monitor. Saturday, 4 days away. The words sat there on the screen, unassuming. And 4 days suddenly felt like very little time at all. 2 days before the party, the house stopped being a home and became a production set. I noticed it. The moment I stepped out of the side door Thursday morning. 3 white vans were already parked along the curb, and strangers in matching black polos were carrying folding tables through the back gate. Someone had ordered enough string lights to outline every tree in the backyard. Someone else was assembling a temporary bar station near the pergola, the kind with a mirrored back panel and built-in refrigeration that rented for more per day than most people earned in a week. I moved to the garage and found my corner the small workbench where I kept my tools and started organizing what didn't need organizing. because standing still in this house on a day like this felt like asking to be reprimanded. Julian appeared in the garage doorway at 9:30, phone pressed to his ear, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. He was pacing 3 steps, left, 3 steps right, the way he always did when a conversation mattered to him. "No, I understand the timeline," he said into the phone, his voice clipped and precise. "But if Hartwell confirms before Friday, we need the presentation restructured before Saturday night. This isn't negotiable." He snapped his fingers, twice a habit that had always made my molars ache, and then turned, slightly catching sight of me at the workbench. He raised his chin in what passed for Julian as a greeting. Then he turned away and kept pacing. I set down the wrench I wasn't using and watched my son for a moment. 42 years old. Broad-shouldered, sharp-jawed, he had Margaret's cheekbones and my jawline, a combination that had always given him an authority his personality was still learning to deserve. But the set of his mouth these days was something neither of us had given him. That particular hardness had arrived somewhere around his mid-30s and never left. He ended the call and shoved the phone into his jacket pocket. "Dad." His voice was businesslike, the tone he used when he wanted to communicate information efficiently and move on. "Saturday night, I need you to stay upstairs during the party, the whole evening." My hand tightened around the wrench. "Understood." These are significant people. Investors, fund directors, 2 board members from Hartwell Capital. He straightened his cuffs, a gesture so automatic it had become punctuation. "I need the evening to go smoothly." "It will," I said. Something moved across his face, not quite guilt, not quite relief. Something in between that he buried quickly under the familiar veneer of efficiency. "Good. Sienna's coordinating the catering and the guest flow, so just stay available if something needs carrying, but otherwise—" He gestured vaguely upward, toward the attic. "You know." He walked back into the house without waiting for my response. I stood at the workbench and breathed through the tightness in my chest, the specific familiar ache of being managed by someone who had once held my hand crossing the street. Sienna found me 20 minutes later, moving through the garage with the energy of a woman who had already decided every surface in the house was insufficiently impressive. She stopped when she saw me. "Can you be useful today?" she asked. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was something worse, indifferent. "The caterers need someone to move the patio furniture to the side yard, and after that stay out of the main areas. I have a photographer coming at 4 to shoot the setup, and I don't—" She gestured at me at my canvas work pants and old flannel shirt with an expression that completed the sentence without words. "I'll move the furniture," I said. "And Saturday evening, I'll stay upstairs." She studied me for a half-second. The way people study a piece of furniture they're deciding whether to keep, and then nodded once and walked away, already back on her phone. I carried 4 teak chairs and a side table to the corner of the side yard by myself. The chairs were heavier than they looked. My lower back registered a complaint that I filed away and ignored. It was while I was on the 3rd chair that I heard Julian's voice through the kitchen window, low and intent, talking to someone inside. "If Vivian Montgomery likes what she sees Saturday, the house, the people, the whole picture, Hartwell moves. I know it. She's the one who matters in that room." A pause. "I just need everything perfect." I set the chair down carefully. "Vivian Montgomery." He said her name the way people say the names of people they want to impress, with a particular reverence that revealed exactly how little they actually knew about her. I knew Vivian Montgomery. I had known her for 30 years. I had known her when she was a 35-year-old designer with a single boutique in River North and a business loan she couldn't cover, and I had known her the morning she called me from her office to tell me that the check I'd quietly arranged through an intermediary had saved everything she'd built. Julian had never asked about my friendships. He had never asked about my history. He had never been curious enough to wonder whether the world his father moved through might intersect with the world he was so desperately trying to enter. I also happened to know that 3 weeks earlier, Julian's assistant had sent Vivian's office a formal invitation, one of 40 sent, to the most prominent names in Chicago philanthropy and finance. Julian had wanted the right people in that room. He had gotten exactly what he asked for. He simply had no way of knowing what that would mean. That evening I climbed back up to the attic, as the string lights came on in the backyard below, warm gold against the darkening sky. I sat in my chair, looked at Margaret's photograph, and picked up my phone. Vivian answered on the second ring. "Sterling." Her voice was warm and precise. She had always sounded like someone who knew exactly how much time was available and intended to use all of it well. "I was wondering when you'd call." "Saturday," I said. "He invited you himself. He just doesn't know who you are to me." A quiet pause. Then the sound of her smiling. "I wouldn't miss it, Sterling. Not for anything." She had received Julian's formal invitation 3 weeks earlier, and accepted it without hesitation, waiting since then for this call to tell her what she already suspected the evening would require. Saturday arrived the way consequential days often do, without fanfare, without any atmospheric indication that the hours ahead would divide my life cleanly into before and after. I knew it would. I had known since Tuesday. By 5 o'clock, the backyard had transformed into something that belonged in a magazine. String lights canopied the entire space, casting everything in warm amber. White-clothed tables held arrangements of white peonies and eucalyptus. The bar was stocked with bottles I recognized by label as things Julian had researched specifically to impress people whose opinions he'd decided mattered. A jazz quartet, 4 musicians in black, stationed near the pergola, was playing something understated and elegant that nobody was listening to. I watched all of it from the attic window. 40 guests arrived in the first hour. I recognized the category immediately, the particular breed of Chicago money that wears its success with practiced casualness. Men in suits that cost $4,000 and were designed to look like they cost $2,000. Women in cocktail dresses carrying handbags that functioned less as accessories and more as credentials. Julian moved through the crowd with the focused energy of a man working, not enjoying working. His smile arrived 2 seconds before he needed it, and disappeared the moment the conversation moved on. Sienna orbited alongside him, her Hermes Kelly bag on her forearm. Her laugh pitched at exactly the frequency that carries across a patio without seeming like it's trying to. I watched my son press his hand to the back of a gray-haired man's shoulder, leaning in, nodding seriously, performing attentiveness, and felt something hollow open up beneath my ribs. I had built a company on genuine relationships, 30 years of looking people in the eye and meaning what I said. Julian had learned the movements without the music. At 6:15, I came downstairs, not because Sienna had asked me to help, she hadn't and wouldn't, but because sitting in the attic watching through glass felt on this particular evening like hiding. And I had not spent 15 years in that house to hide on the night that mattered. I found an empty serving tray in the kitchen, loaded it with water glasses, and moved into the backyard. Nobody looked at me directly. A few guests registered my presence with a slight adjustment of attention, the way people notice something slightly out of place without wanting to commit to identifying it. I was too old to be staff, too plainly dressed to be a guest. I existed in a category the evening hadn't planned for. Julian noticed me from across the patio. His jaw tightened. He excused himself from the conversation he was in, crossed toward me, and spoke very quietly. "I thought we agreed you'd stay upstairs." "I'm carrying water," I said. "Dad." His voice dropped lower, the particular register he used when he wanted to communicate urgency without visible emotion. These people, this isn't the time for... He pressed his lips together. Please. The word came out like it cost him something. I held his gaze for a moment, those eyes that were Margaret's shape and my color, and then I turned and kept moving through the crowd. Sienna appeared at my left elbow within 90 seconds. What are you doing down here? Her voice was a razor wrapped in silk. I specifically... Vivian Montgomery just arrived, I said. Sienna's entire posture changed. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted, her hand moved automatically to the Kelly bag on her arm, adjusting its position, verifying its visibility. Where? I nodded toward the entrance gate. She was already moving. I turned and looked toward the gate myself. And there she was. Vivian Montgomery, 72 years old, wearing a simple charcoal wrap dress and a single strand of pearls, moving through the entrance with the unhurried confidence of a woman who has spent decades understanding that presence is not about volume. Her eyes swept the backyard in a single slow arc. Guests she recognized. The bar, the quartet, the tables, and then her gaze found me standing at the edge of the patio, holding a tray of water glasses in my canvas calloused hands, wearing a shirt that had seen better decades. The corner of her mouth moved. It was almost nothing. A quarter-inch of expression that lasted less than a second before her face returned to its composed public register. But I caught it. Because I was looking for it. Julian materialized beside Vivian within moments, extending his hand, his best smile assembled and deployed. Mrs. Montgomery, I'm Julian Vance. Thank you so much for... Yes, Vivian said pleasantly, shaking his hand with the brief efficiency of someone confirming a name they already knew. Of course. Her eyes tracked to Sienna, who had arrived at Julian's side with the Kelly bag positioned at precisely the angle calculated to be noticed. What a lovely home. Thank you. Sienna breathed, her voice lifting 2 registers with excitement. We've put so much into it. The renovation alone took... Vivian smiled. It was a complete smile that communicated nothing. Then she turned deliberately and looked directly at me across the patio. Sterling, she said. Her voice carried clearly over the jazz in the conversation. It's been too long. Every head within earshot turned. Julian's smile didn't fall, it froze, which was somehow worse. His eyes moved from Vivian to me and back again, and I watched the first hairline crack appear in the certainty he had walked into this evening wearing. I set the tray down on the nearest table, straightened, and walked toward her. Vivian, I took her hand. You look exactly the same. She laughed, genuine, and full the laugh of someone who has earned the right to mean it. You're a terrible liar, Sterling. You always were. She squeezed my hand once firmly and then released it. Her eyes moved to Julian, who was standing very still, his glass halfway to his mouth, his expression recalibrating in real time. Your father, Vivian said to Julian pleasantly, once drove 4 hours in a February blizzard to personally guarantee a business loan for me. Did he ever tell you that story? Julian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His hand holding the glass had gone rigid at his side, knuckles bloodless against the crystal. No, he said finally. His voice came out smaller than he intended. He didn't. No. Vivian agreed, her tone warm and perfectly terribly even. I suppose he wouldn't. She turned back to me, and I saw in her eyes the particular steadiness of someone who had arrived, knowing exactly what the evening required of her. The evening was just beginning, and we both knew it, The party had reached that particular hour when alcohol and ambition combine into something combustible. I had been moving quietly along the edges of the patio for the better part of an hour, refilling water glasses, collecting empty appetizer plates, making myself useful in the way that invisible people learn to be useful. The jazz quartet had shifted into something livelier. The laughter was louder. The conversations had migrated from careful professional positioning into the looser territory of people who believed the evening was going well. Vivian had been working the room with the patience of someone who has attended 1,000 events exactly like this one, and understands that the most important conversations happen in the margins. I watched her from across the patio, the way she listened more than she spoke, the way she asked questions that made people feel intelligent for answering them. She was magnificent. She had always been magnificent. I was carrying a tray of sparkling water toward the far table when my shoe caught the edge of the decorative stone border along the garden path. It happened in less than a second. The tray tilted. My left hand grabbed for it a half-beat too late. One glass slid, struck the corner of the table, and the contents, cold, still water, arced through the air in a clean, unavoidable curve directly onto the arm Vivian was holding at her side. Onto the bag. The Hermes Birkin. Porosus crocodile leather. A bag that I happened to know Vivian had purchased in Paris 11 years ago for $180,000 and had carried perhaps 6 times since. "Oh, Vivian, I'm so sorry." I reached for a napkin immediately, my hands already moving. Vivian looked down at the bag. Then she looked up at me. And in the half-second before anyone else had processed what happened, I saw something in her eyes that was not anger. It was not distress. It was a composed, deliberate steadiness, the look of a woman who had planned for contingencies. She took the napkin from my hand. "Sterling, it's fine," she said, her voice perfectly calm. "Really?" But Sienna had already arrived. I heard her before I saw her, the sharp crack of her heels on the stone, the particular velocity of a woman moving towards something she intends to make an example of. She materialized at the edge of the circle that had formed around us, her face flushed with a color that had nothing to do with the evening's warmth. What did you do?" Her voice cut through the jazz and the conversation like a blade through silk. Every head turned. The quartet faltered for exactly one measure before recovering. "Do you have any idea? Do you have any concept?" "Sienna," I said steadily. "It was an accident. The bag is fine. I don't." She raised one finger, and her whole arm was trembling, not with grief, with fury. "Don't you dare stand there and tell me it's fine." She turned to face the assembled guests, and I watched her make a calculation, in real time, the kind of calculation people make when they decide that humiliation properly directed can become performance. "This man," she announced, her voice pitched to carry, "just destroyed a bag worth more than most people's mortgages." The circle widened. More people turned. Sienna pivoted and strode into the house. The sliding door banged behind her. Every person on that patio was watching it when she reappeared 30 seconds later, both hands wrapped around the handle of her own Hermes Kelly caramel leather gold hardware, held aloft like evidence. "Look at this." She thrust it toward me, toward the crowd, toward Vivian. $40,000. This is what a real bag looks like. And your filthy hands. Her voice broke on the last word, not from emotion, but from the effort of projecting it across the entire yard. "You're not even worthy of being in the same room as something like this, let alone touching it, let alone destroying it." The yard was absolutely still. I felt my jaw tighten until the muscle ached. My hands hanging at my sides curled once and then deliberately uncurled. I would not give her the satisfaction of watching me flinch. Vivian had been dabbing the bag calmly with the napkin. She finished. She folded the napkin in half with the particular precision of a woman who has decided exactly what she is about to do. Then she looked up, and she looked at Sienna's Kelly bag, and she looked at it for long enough that the silence became its own presence. "Sienna," she said. Her voice was pleasant, conversational, the voice of a woman discussing the weather. "My bag is fine. A little water never damaged real porous leather. It's actually quite resilient when properly maintained." She paused, and the pause had weight. "But that Kelly you're holding." Sienna's chin lifted. "What about it? It's a knockoff." Vivian's voice didn't change in pitch or temperature. "The stitching on the gusset is machine done. Hermes uses only hand saddle stitching on every piece, no exceptions. The hardware engraving is shallow gin. Kelly hardware is struck, not printed. And that particular shade of caramel hasn't been produced by Hermes in that leather grade since 2019. She tilted her head slightly. "I've been the chairman of Montgomery Group for 16 years. We authenticate luxury goods for 7 of the world's top insurers. Did you genuinely think you could present a black market replica to me?" The sound that followed was not silence. It was 40 people simultaneously deciding not to speak. Sienna's arm dropped. The fake Kelly hung from her fingers like something that had stopped being a weapon and become a liability. Her face had gone the color of old paper. Her mouth opened, and what came out was not words, but a sound. A small, strangled exhale, the sound of a performance reaching a conclusion its performer had not scripted. Several phones had already appeared. I could hear the muted clicks of cameras finding their angles. I looked at Vivian. She met my gaze briefly, and in that brief exchange communicated everything. She was not sorry. She had known this was a possibility when she walked through the gate, and she had decided somewhere between the entrance and this moment that some things needed to be seen clearly. My chest hurt with a complicated ache that had nothing to do with the fall part, grief part, relief part, something I did not yet have a name for. I looked at Sienna, her beautiful, carefully assembled life unraveling in real time in front of everyone she had built it to impress, and I felt no satisfaction. Only the particular sorrow of watching something inevitable finally arrive. The walk from the center of the patio to the driveway took approximately 90 seconds. I know, because I counted my own footsteps, an old habit from my years on shipping floors, where you learned to measure distances by how long it took to cover them. Julian had my arm above the elbow, his grip firm enough to communicate urgency without technically constituting force. Sienna was 3 steps ahead, moving with the mechanical speed of someone who had decided that forward momentum was the only alternative to collapse. The driveway was lit by the motion sensor lights along the garage wall. The front of the house faced a quiet street, where I noticed 2 neighbors had found reasons to check their mailboxes at 7:30 on a Saturday evening. Julian released my arm and positioned himself between me and the gate. "Do you understand?" he said, and his voice had dropped into that low, pressurized register that I had heard him use in business negotiations, the voice that was designed to communicate finality without volume. "Do you have any comprehension of what you just did in there?" "I spilled water," I said, "on a bag that handled it fine." "Stop." His hand came up, palm out, the gesture of a man dismissing a subordinate. "Just stop talking." His jaw was working, the muscle in his cheek jumping visibly. "I have been building toward tonight for 6 months. 6 months of positioning, of networking, of making exactly the right impression on exactly the right people, and you." He jabbed one finger in my direction, and his hand was shaking. "You just made my wife look like a fraud in front of the entire room. Your wife made your wife look like a fraud," I said. "I spilled water." Julian's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: disbelief, fury, something that looked briefly like shame before fury reclaimed it. "Get inside," he said. "Get upstairs. Stay there." Sienna stepped forward. Her composure had hardened into something brittle and dangerous, the expression of someone who has been publicly humiliated and is now with great precision selecting a target. "Oh, you are a stain," she said. Her voice was quiet now, which was worse. "On everything we've built. On this house, on Julian's reputation. On everything." She looked at me with an expression I can only describe as disgust, stripped of all social veneer. "You are a mold spot on $1 million painting, and I am done pretending otherwise. Get back to your attic and stay there. Tonight. Permanently." "Sienna," Julian started. "No." She turned on him, and her eyes were bright with the particular fury of someone who has been made to look foolish and needs someone to absorb the consequence. "No, Julian. I told you. I told you months ago that having him here was a liability. I told you that having a groundskeeper living in our attic was going to cost us eventually, and tonight—" Her voice cracked at the edges, raw and jagged. "Tonight I was right." Julian turned back to me. The shaking in his hands had migrated to his shoulders. The garage and I heard the scrape of something heavy being dragged, and then he came back, pulling my old travel bag, battered canvas, the zipper broken on one end, and dropped it on the driveway between us. The bag hit the pavement, and one side split, and several things fell out and scattered, and he didn't look down at them. 15 years. His voice had gone flat. The flatness was more frightening than the fury. 15 years I fed you. 15 years I gave you a roof, a room, 3 meals a day. I drove you to your doctor's appointments. I let you live in my house." He stepped closer, and his eyes were wet at the corners. Not from sadness, I understood, but from the physical effort of containing the rage in his chest. "That is more than enough repayment for whatever debt I owe you for being alive. Look at yourself. A broke old widower with no money, no position, nothing left to offer anyone. If it weren't for my name, if people didn't know you as Julian's father, you would be invisible. You would be nothing." Each word landed with a specific physical weight. I felt them settle into my sternum one at a time, the way stones settle into water. "I have spent," Julian continued, his voice dropping lower, more deliberate, "half of my adult life climbing out from under your shadow, your mediocrity, your failure to be anything that I could point to and say that is where I come from. That is something worth inheriting." He stepped back and pulled out his phone with a hand that would not stop trembling. "Get out of my house. Tonight. Before I call the police and report a trespassing situation. Julia." My voice came out steadier than I felt. The steadiness was not courage. It was the steadiness of a man who has known for 15 years that this conversation was coming, and has had time to decide how to stand through it. He was already dialing. He pressed the phone to his ear and switched to speaker deliberately, I understood, so that everyone still within earshot on the patio could hear. "Yes, hello. I'm calling about arranging immediate placement for an elderly individual who can no longer be accommodated in the current living situation. No, tonight, if possible. Cost is not actually the most affordable option available, yes. I won't be covering ongoing expenses." The motion sensor light above the garage clicked off. In the sudden dimness, I looked at my son. This man I had watched take his first steps on a hardwood floor in our first house, who had once fallen asleep against my shoulder on a long flight home, and whose hair had smelled improbably of something I could not name, but would recognize anywhere. And I felt a grief so profound and so specific that it pressed against my ribs from the inside, like something trying to get out. I looked down at the driveway. The bag had split further when it landed. Some things had rolled toward the edge of the driveway. I did not look at what they were. I could not just then. I checked my watch. 7:42. I had told Gideon 8 o'clock if things moved quickly. They had moved quickly. I put my hand in my pocket and found the edge of Margaret's photograph with my thumb. I pressed it there, just pressed it, just held the pressure, and breathed once, slowly, through the particular pain of watching someone you love become someone you don't recognize. Then I took my phone out, and I waited. Before I tell you what happened in the 60 seconds after Julian made that phone call, type 7 in the comments right now. Just so I know you're still with me. Because what comes next is something nobody standing on that street was prepared for. This story contains fictional elements crafted to carry a truth that is entirely real. If that's not for you, no hard feelings. But if you're staying, hold on. I have been in boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were made in under 4 minutes. I have stood on the floor of a shipping port at 3 in the morning while a Category 2 storm pushed 30-foot swells against a vessel carrying $12 million of cargo. I have held Margaret's hand in a hospital room and listened to a doctor say the word terminal without flinching because she needed me not to flinch. I know how to stand still when the world is moving badly around me. So I stood in that driveway in the motion sensor dark, with my broken bag at my feet and Julian's voice still ringing somewhere in the back of my skull, and I breathed. 1 breath. 2. My hand pressed the photograph in my pocket until I could feel the edges of it through the fabric, until that small rectangle of cardstock became the only fixed point in a world that had come slightly unmoored. 7:43. The sound arrived before the light did. It started as a low vibration, the kind you feel in your chest, before your ears fully register it. The particular harmonic of multiple large engines moving in coordinated formation. I had heard that sound before in a different context, on a different night. Outside a courthouse in downtown Chicago, where we had just finalized the largest acquisition in Vance Global's history. Gideon had arranged the convoy then too. He had always believed that the manner of arrival communicated something that words alone could not. Julian heard it first. His head turned toward the street, his brow compressing with the expression of a man encountering something that doesn't fit his current model of the world. What is? The first Escalade turned the corner, then the second. Then the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth black, as the October sky above them, each one gleaming despite the evening's humidity. Each one flying a small pennant from the antenna, the Vance Global flag navy and gold, the compass rose at its center. They moved with the unhurried precision of a motorcade spaced exactly 2 car lengths apart, and they filled our quiet Naperville street from one end to the other like a tide coming in. Every motion sensor light on the block activated simultaneously. The entire street went white. On this patio, I heard the jazz quartet stop mid-phrase. I heard 40 people go very quiet. The Escalades parked, 6 of them in a line, engines ticking down in sequence. Then the doors opened, all of them at once, and 12 men in tailored black suits stepped onto the pavement. They moved with the kind of quiet efficiency that does not come from military training or security work alone, but from years of doing a job with enough pride to do it well. Gideon Clark stepped out of the center vehicle. He was 61 years old, trim and deliberate, with silver at his temples and the posture of a man who had spent 2 decades walking into rooms that required him to represent something larger than himself. He wore a charcoal suit, a navy tie, and the Vance Global lapel pin, the same compass, rose smaller, catching the light as he moved. He crossed the driveway in 12 measured steps and stopped directly in front of me. Then he bowed. Not a nod, not a tilt of the head, a genuine full bow, the kind that comes from respect so deeply habituated that it has become involuntary. "Oh, Chairman Vance." His voice was clear and carried easily in the still air. "The full board of directors is assembled and waiting at the venue. The press conference begins in 1 hour. Your remarks have been prepared, and the Foundation has confirmed attendance of 412 guests." He straightened and met my eyes. "We are ready when you are, sir." The silence on the patio was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I watched Julian's face from my peripheral vision, because looking at him directly felt in that moment like more than either of us could absorb. I watched the information travel through him the way a current travels through water. The frown first, then the rapid blinking, then the particular stillness of a man whose entire understanding of a situation has just been structurally compromised. His lips moved. One word, barely audible. "Vance." Not a question. A recalibration. Vivian had walked from the patio to the edge of the driveway. She moved to stand beside me, not behind me, not in front of me, beside me, with the particular positioning of someone who has decided to make a statement through proximity alone. She looked up at me, and her eyes were warm in a way that had nothing to do with the string lights behind her. "Thank you, Sterling," she said. Her voice was low enough that it was meant for me, though it carried in the still air. Tonight made everything very clear. "It did," I agreed. She pressed my hand, once a brief, firm pressure. The handshake of an old friendship that has survived 30 years and several storms. And then she stepped back and looked at Julian, who was standing 8 feet away, with his hand still holding the phone from which he had just arranged to have his father transported to a budget care facility. Julian's hand was no longer shaking. It had gone entirely still, the stillness of shock that has moved past, trembling into something deeper and more fundamental. His face had lost its color by degrees, the way a photograph fades in sunlight. Not all at once, but progressively, until what remains is a bleached version of what was. You know each other," he said. His voice cracked on the last word like a fault line giving way. "I've known your father," Vivian said pleasantly, "since before you graduated college." Julian turned to me. His mouth opened, and the question that came out was barely a question at all. It was the sound of a man reaching for a handhold in empty air. "Who are you?" My chest ached with a grief so layered and so old that it had stopped feeling like grief and started feeling like whether something you lived inside, rather than something that happened to you. I looked at my son. This man with Margaret's cheekbones and my jaw, and 15 years of careful, deliberate distance between us. "I'm your father," I said. "I have always been your father." You simply never asked what that meant. One of Gideon's team stepped quietly to my side. "Sir, whenever you're ready." I reached down and picked up the broken bag from the driveway. I handed it to Gideon without looking away from Julian. Gideon took it without comment. He had learned in 23 years not to comment on the things that mattered most. I looked at Julian one last time. His eyes were wet now, not crying, not yet, but the kind of wet that precedes it, the pressure of something enormous trying to find its exit. "I kept a promise to your mother tonight," I said. "She would have wanted you to know that eventually." I paused. "I hope one day you'll understand why I kept it." Then I turned and walked toward the center escalade, and Gideon fell into step beside me, and the night air of Naperville, Illinois smelled of cut grass and cooling engines, and something that might have been, if I was being honest with myself, the first breath of freedom I had taken in 15 years. The door closed behind me. The convoy began to move, and I did not look back. I have always found that motion makes grief more manageable. There is something about the forward momentum of a vehicle, the way the world streams past a window, and does not slow to accommodate your feelings, that forces a kind of processing that stillness resists. Margaret and I used to drive after difficult conversations, not to a destination, just to move. She would sit in the passenger seat with her feet on the dashboard, and she would talk or she wouldn't, and eventually the motion would do its work. I sat in the rear of the center Escalade as Chicago's outer suburbs gave way to the city proper and watched the lights of Naperville disappear in the side mirror. Gideon sat across from me, laptop open, reading glasses on. He had the particular quality of a man who knows when to speak and has made a career of the discipline required not to when the moment doesn't call for it. We had been moving for 11 minutes before he cleared his throat. "Though the footage is already circulating," he said. "The bag incident. Someone posted it to Instagram within 4 minutes of it happening. As of 20 minutes ago, it has been shared over 6,000 times." My eyes stayed on the window. Sienna's account, down 43,000 followers in the last hour. He turned the laptop toward me briefly, showing a graph that plunged like a dropped stone. 3 brands have already sent private messages through her management agency, indicating they'll be reviewing their partnership agreements. He paused. One of them sent a public statement. I pressed my back teeth together until the ache radiated into my jaw. "What about Julian?" Gideon set the laptop on the seat beside him and leaned forward, and I knew from the particular set of his shoulders that the next information required the full weight of his attention. "The care facility," he called. His voice was careful. The director recognized his voice. "The facility runs a quarterly newsletter that features Vance Global's annual donation quite prominently." He held my gaze. The director recorded the call under Illinois one-party consent law, which permits any party to a phone call to legally record it without notifying the other party. He contacted the Chicago Tribune at 8:07 this evening. The information landed in my chest like cold water. Not surprised, I had anticipated something like this as a possibility. But the reality of it stated plainly in the moving dark of a company car pressed differently than anticipation had. "The story will run tomorrow morning," Gideon continued. "The Tribune has the audio. The headline they've shared with our press office for comment is," he glanced at his notes, "Most ungrateful son in Chicago." I exhaled slowly, and the sound came out rougher than I intended. My hand found the armrest and gripped it. "Did our press office comment?" I asked. "I instructed them not to." Gideon watched me carefully. "Was that the correct call, sir?" "Yes." My voice came out quieter than I meant it to. "Yes, that was right." Gideon nodded and returned to his laptop. The city was fully around us now. The elevated train tracks, the sodium yellow streetlights, the particular compressed energy of a Friday night in a city that never fully sleeps. "Gideon," my voice stopped him. "The bills, the house." He understood immediately. We had spoken about this framework years ago, when the arrangement was first established. "Yes, sir. 15 years of property tax, utility costs, maintenance contracts, and HOA fees for the Naperville property. All automatically processed through Vance Global's discretionary account under a residential management subsidiary." He turned a page in his folio. "The cumulative figure adjusted for annual rate increases is approximately $840,000. $840,000 that Julian believed he had spent on his own home. $840,000 he had never actually paid." I thought about the way Julian had said it on the driveway, his voice flat and certain and cruel. "I gave you 15 years of meals, a roof, a bed. That more than repays whatever debt I owe you for being born." My eyes burned. I pressed the heel of my hand against my right eye briefly, and breathed through the tightness in my chest until it loosened enough to speak. "And the care facility," I said. "He said he wouldn't pay another cent. The facility's annual operating budget receives a Vance Global contribution of $300,000. Gideon's voice was perfectly steady. Not cold, just factual, the way a good second-in-command learns to deliver information that their employer needs to hear clearly. "The director has indicated he will be returning Julian's call in the morning, with the recording." I turned to face the window again. I thought of Margaret. Then not her words, which I had carried long enough to know by heart, but her face in that hospital room. The way she had looked at me when I said I promise. The certainty in her eyes that I would keep it. She had been right about the danger. What she had not anticipated, what neither of us had, was that the silence itself would become its own kind of damage. And I had kept my promise, and I had watched it happen, and now I was sitting in a moving car while the consequences of 15 years of silence arranged themselves into a shape that could not be undone. "Gideon," I said. My voice was steady. "How many things does Julian not know about himself?" Gideon was quiet for a moment. That had nothing to do with uncertainty, and everything to do with choosing the right entry point into a long answer. "Sir," he said finally, enough to change everything he believes about who he is. I looked down at my hands in my lap. The hands Sienna had called filthy hands, that had built something across 5 decades, that spanned 14 countries and 10,000 employees, and one promise made to a dying woman in a room that smelled of antiseptic and cut flowers. "Tell me," I said. "Start from the beginning." Gideon closed his laptop and set it on the seat beside him. That gesture alone told me the next part of the conversation required his full attention and mine. Julian's position at Hartwell Capital. He began, his voice measured and deliberate, the voice he used when delivering information that had weight. His promotion to vice president 3 years ago. "Do you remember when he called to tell you?" I remembered. He had called on a Tuesday morning, and his voice had carried a quality I hadn't heard in years, the unguarded excitement of a boy who has just done something he's genuinely proud of. I had sat in the attic with the phone pressed to my ear and let myself feel something close to hope. "I remember," I said. "The managing partners at Hartwell made that decision for one reason, sir." Gideon held my gaze steadily, not flinching from what he was about to say. "They knew who his father was. 3 of the 5 partners have active shipping contracts with Vance Global subsidiaries. A 4th sits on the advisory board of our Pacific Rim division." He paused. "Julian has never known this. He has believed genuinely that he earned that position on the strength of his sales record." The ache that moved through my chest at those words was not simple. It was layered grief for the boy who deserved to believe in himself, and something sharper underneath it, directed inward at the man who had made choices that produced this particular outcome. "And his performance?" I asked, though some part of me already sensed the answer. "Adequate," Gideon said carefully. "His numbers have been solid in the years when market conditions were favorable. In leaner quarters, he has compensated with personality rather than strategy." He adjusted his reading glasses. "There have been 2 internal reviews flagging his management style. Both were quietly resolved at the partner level without formal documentation." He let that settle. "Because of who he is." I pressed both palms flat against my thighs and breathed through the specific weight of that information. "Tell me about tonight," I said. After the convoy left, Gideon reached for his phone and read from the screen. Within 8 minutes of our departure, the remaining guests began leaving. Not in groups, individually, quietly, the way people leave when they've witnessed something they don't want to be associated with. His tone carried no satisfaction, only precision. By 8:15, the patio was empty. The catering staff began breaking down the tables at 8:20 because there was no one left to serve. I turned to the window. The highway had opened up now, the city's dense grid giving way to the wider arteries leading downtown, and the lights of Chicago proper were spreading across the horizon like something that had always been there waiting. "The bag," I said. "My bag. What happened to it?" Gideon's expression shifted just slightly, a softening around the eyes that he rarely permitted himself. When Julian threw it onto the driveway, the seam on the left side gave way on impact. He looked at his phone again. Several items fell out. One of the remaining guests photographed what was on the ground before leaving. He turned the phone toward me. The photograph was taken from 6 or 7 feet away, slightly blurred at the edges from a phone camera in low light. But the contents were clear enough. A child's crayon drawing the waxy colors, still bright despite decades of 2 stick figures standing in front of a house. The taller figure had the word "Dad" written above it in block letters, the D reversed the way a 4-year-old reverses letters. Beside the drawing, a small sneaker, white canvas with a Velcro strap worn at the toe. The first pair Julian had ever walked in. My throat closed. I pressed my hand over my mouth and held it there for a moment, breathing through my nose. Because 70 years old is not too old to need a moment to hold yourself together when you are looking at a photograph of the first shoe your son ever wore, lying on a rain-damp driveway next to a discarded bag. "Sir." Gideon's voice was very quiet. The guest who posted it wrote one line. He read from the screen. "The father kept everything. The son kept nothing." The sound I made was not quite a word. I cleared my throat and turned back to the window. "How many shares?" My voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. 14,000 as of this hour." Gideon set the phone down. "It's still climbing." I thought about Julian standing on that driveway, looking down at the contents of a bag he had thrown without looking at, discovering in front of his neighbors and his departing guests, and the motion sensor lights that his father had carried his childhood across 15 years in a broken canvas bag, because it was the closest thing to carrying the boy himself. I wondered what that felt like. I found that I could not imagine it precisely enough, and that the inability to imagine it hurt in its own particular way. "Gideon," I said. "The diary." He understood immediately. "Still in the attic, sir." I confirmed with the team it was not among the items that fell from the bag. I exhaled a long, slow breath of relief that surprised me with its intensity. The diary. 15 years of entries. Every night in that attic room, writing down the things I could not say aloud. Writing down the pride and the grief and the hope and the slow, grinding disappointment and the small moments that kept the hope alive. Writing down Julian's name over and over in the margins of days he never knew I was watching. "I need to go back for it," I said. "Tomorrow," Gideon said firmly in the tone he used when he was protecting me from myself. "Tonight, sir, you have 400 guests waiting and a speech to give in honor of Margaret." His voice gentled on her name. "She would want you present for that." My eyes burned again the second time tonight, which was 2 more times than I had allowed in the past 6 months combined. "You're right," I said roughly. "You're right." The Chicago skyline filled the windshield, now glass and steel, and light the city that had been the beginning of everything. I straightened my back, squared my shoulders, and thought of Margaret. Then I thought of the small white sneaker lying on the wet driveway, and I let myself feel both things at once, because that I had learned was what it meant to still be alive. The hotel room was on the 14th floor east-facing, and when I pulled back the curtains at 6 in the morning, Lake Michigan stretched to the horizon in the early light, like hammered pewter, enormous and still and completely indifferent to everything that had happened in Naperville the night before. I had slept 4 hours. It was enough. It had been enough for 50 years of early mornings, and it was enough now. Gideon had arranged breakfast in the hotel restaurant at 8, a round-corner table near the windows, away from the other guests, with enough privacy for a conversation that required it. I arrived 7 minutes early. Vivienne arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple charcoal blazer and carrying nothing but her phone, which she placed face down on the table the moment she sat down, the gesture of a woman who has decided this hour belongs to one thing only. "You look exhausted," she said, studying my face with the frankness of someone who has known you long enough to have earned the right. "I look 70, I said. She laughed, that full, generous laugh that had not changed in 30 years. "You look 70 and exhausted. Order the eggs." She picked up the menu, glanced at it, set it down. "Sterling, how are you honestly?" My hand tightened around the coffee cup. "I've been better," I said. "And I've been worse. Last night was—" I exhaled through my nose. "It was what it needed to be." "It was," she agreed. Her expression settled into something more serious. "I want to tell you something about what happened, about why I responded to Sienna the way I did. I assumed it wasn't spontaneous," I said. Vivienne folded her hands on the table. 3 weeks ago, a colleague of mine in the authentication community flagged Sienna's Kelly bag during a charity auction event on the North Shore. The piece had been photographed and catalogued. The provenance was traced to a counterfeit supplier operating out of a warehouse in Queens, the same supplier who's been selling luxury replicas through private channels in Chicago for the past 2 years. She held my gaze. "I had already confirmed it before I walked through your son's gate last night." The coffee cup in my hand felt suddenly heavier. "You came knowing." "I came because you asked me to," she said clearly. "And because some truths need a witness to become real." She leaned forward slightly. "Sterling, I did not engineer that moment. I responded to what Sienna chose to do with it." Her voice was firm and without apology. "She chose to use your stumble as a stage. She chose to perform. I simply declined to be the audience she needed." I looked at her across the table, this woman I had known when she had nothing, and watched build something remarkable from that nothing. And I felt the particular warmth of a friendship that has survived long enough to become something close to family. "There's more," she said. Her tone shifted, careful now, the way it shifted when the information required handling. "About Sienna. About why she pushed Julian to remove you from the house." I set the cup down. "Tell me." Vivienne glanced briefly at the window, then back. "I have a contact at a private banking firm in Geneva. Not someone I use professionally, someone I've known socially for years." She paused. "Sienna opened an account through a private intermediary approximately 8 months ago. The deposits have been regular and structured to stay below the reporting thresholds, a practice called smurfing in financial compliance circles, designed to avoid triggering automatic reporting requirements under the Bank Secrecy Act. The Bank Secrecy Act, a U.S. federal law requiring financial institutions to report transactions over $10,000 to prevent money laundering. Structuring deposits to avoid that threshold was itself a federal crime. My jaw tightened until I could feel the pressure in my back teeth. She was preparing to leave. "She has been preparing to leave for the better part of a year," Vivienne said. "The timeline aligns with when she began pushing Julian more aggressively to remove you from the household. The legal argument she appears to have been constructing." She paused. is that the presence of a dependent family member represented a shared financial liability that entitled her to a larger share of marital assets in a divorce settlement. The air left my lungs slowly like a tire deflating. She was using me, I said. Not a question. As leverage, Vivian confirmed. Your presence in that house was not an inconvenience to her lifestyle, Sterling. It was a legal instrument she intended to deploy. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried something that looked very much like anger on my behalf. Julian has no idea. I stared at the lake through the window, that enormous, indifferent gray expanse, and felt the full architecture of it assemble in my mind. Sienna's impatience, the escalating cruelty, the pressure on Julian month after month to do something about his father. All of it pointing not toward vanity or social embarrassment, but toward a calculated exit strategy. Does Julian know any of this? I asked. Not yet, Vivian said. And possibly not ever, depending on how events unfold. She looked at me steadily. What he does know as of this morning is that his wife's public humiliation last night is trending on 3 separate social platforms, that his name appears in a Tribune article running in 4 hours, and that his father left in a convoy of 6 company vehicles. She reached across the table and touched my hand briefly, one firm, warm pressure. He is, I suspect, doing the mathematics. I thought about Julian in that big empty house, the catering tables half dismantled, the string lights still burning over a party that had ended 2 hours early. Doing the mathematics. Vivienne, I said, there's one more thing I haven't told you. I looked down at my coffee. What I found out last night about his career. She waited, her eyes steady on mine. He earned none of it, I said. The words came out rough and quiet, the way the most painful truths tend to. Not the title, not the position. They kept him because of my name. My voice cracked at the last word, just slightly, just enough to betray the 15 years it had taken me to say it out loud. I built a shadow he lived inside without knowing it was a shadow. Vivienne was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone with nothing to say, but the silence of someone choosing the right thing from among several true options. Sterling, she said at last. You built a company. Julian chose how to inhabit the world that company created. Her voice was gentle but unyielding. Those are 2 separate decisions, and only one of them belongs to you. I pressed my hand flat on the tablecloth and breathed. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing a thing and being released by it are 2 entirely different experiences, and I was not yet released. There's something else, she said quietly. Something about Julian's career that I haven't told you yet. She picked up her coffee cup and held it without drinking. About the promotion. About what the partners actually said to each other when they made that decision. I looked at her. My chest tightened with the particular anticipation of information that will change the shape of something you thought you already understood. Tell me, I said. Vivian set her coffee cup down with the deliberate care of someone preparing to say something that cannot be unsaid. The 5 managing partners at Hartwell Capital. She began, met on a Thursday afternoon in March, 2 years before Julian's promotion. I know this because one of those partners is my husband's college roommate, and he told me the story at a dinner party 18 months ago before any of us knew what last night would look like. She held my gaze steadily. They spent 40 minutes reviewing 3 candidates for the vice president position. Julian ranked 3rd on every measurable metric: revenue generation, client retention, strategic initiative. Her voice was careful, each word placed with precision. Then one of the partners said 4 words that ended the discussion. He said Sterling Vance's son. The air went out of me slowly like a sail losing wind. "And that was sufficient," I said. My voice came out flat, scraped clean of inflection. "Yeah, that was sufficient," Vivian confirmed. One partner reportedly said, "And I want to be exact here. We keep Sterling's boy close, and we keep Sterling's goodwill closer." There was no further discussion. The vote was unanimous. She reached for her cup, then changed her mind and left it on the table. Julian has spent 2 years believing he won that room. He has never won a room in his life on his own merits. I pressed both hands palm down on the tablecloth and focused on the texture of the linen against my skin, something physical, something real, because the alternative was to sit with the full weight of what I had just heard, pressing on my sternum until it cracked something. "Thank you," I said, "for telling me." "I'm sorry it's true," she said simply. We finished breakfast mostly in the practical language of old friends, who have learned that sometimes presence is the most useful thing one person can offer another. Vivian left at 9:15, squeezing my shoulder, as she passed a brief firm pressure that said more than either of us needed to put into words. By 2 in the afternoon, I was in a car heading back to Naperville, not because I wanted to, because there was one thing left in that attic that I could not leave behind, and Gideon had confirmed that morning it was still there. The street looked different in daylight, quieter. The string lights had been taken down someone from the catering company, presumably, and without them, the backyard visible through the side gate looked like exactly what it was, a large, expensively landscaped yard attached to a house that had never quite managed to become a home. I let myself in through the side entrance with the key I had carried for 15 years and climbed the attic stairs, stepping over the 4th step from habit. The attic was exactly as I had left it. The false panel behind the boxes was closed and latched. The chair at the desk still held the slight impression of my weight. The monitors were dark. And from somewhere inside the house below me I heard voices. Julian's voice, strained, high-pitched, in a way I had never heard from him. The voice of a man operating beyond the boundaries of his self-control. And Sienna's voice beneath it, sharp and fast, cutting across his sentences before they finished. I stood at the top of the attic stairs and listened, because the sounds rose clearly through the old house's thin interior walls, and because sometimes you do not get to choose what you witness. "I told you months ago he was a liability." Sienna's voice cracked at the edges with the ragged energy of someone who had been holding this particular speech in reserve. "I told you, Julian, and you kept saying, 'Give it more time, give it more time.'" "Don't." Julian's voice was raw. "Don't stand there and pretend this is about him. This has never been about him. It has always been about him. Everything in this marriage has been filtered through your inability to deal with your own father." My inability." The volume jumped. "You are the one who told me to call that facility. You handed me the phone, Sienna. You literally put the phone in my hand." A pause filled with the sound of someone breathing hard. "I suggested options," Sienna said. Her voice had dropped, shifted into the cooler register of someone regrouping. "You made the choice." That's remarkable." Julian's voice had gone flat and cold in a way that made my chest tighten. "That is genuinely remarkable. You coached me through every step of tonight, and now you're standing in our living room telling me you suggested options. Our living room." Sienna's voice came back like a blade. "Is it because apparently nothing in this house belongs to us? Apparently we've been living in your father's house this entire time, paying your father's bills with your father's money, building your father's career." "Stop." Julian's voice broke on the word, cracked right down the middle. The sound of a man hitting the floor of something. Just stop talking. I will not stop. Her voice climbed again. I gave up 6 years of my life to this marriage, Julian. 6 years of managing your image, your social calendar, your relationships with the right people. Do you think that happened by accident? Do you think any of tonight happened by accident? What does that mean? Julian's voice sharpened. What do you mean by accident? A beat of silence, the kind that arrives when someone realizes they have said more than they intended. It means, Sienna said, recovering quickly, pivoting with the practiced speed of someone who has learned to navigate her own slips, that I have worked hard for this family, and I deserve better than to be humiliated in front of 400 people because your father cannot stay out of the way. You humiliated yourself, Julian said. The flatness in his voice was absolute now. Vivian Montgomery didn't humiliate you. That bag humiliated you. The sound that followed was something breaking. I couldn't tell what, something ceramic, something that shattered against a hard surface, and then footsteps and a door slamming hard enough to shake the ceiling above me. My hand found the banister. I gripped it. I descended the attic stairs, slowly stepped over the 4th step, and moved down to the main floor. I crossed the kitchen without making a sound, and took the back stairs to the attic landing where I had left the one thing I had come for. The diary was on the shelf where it always was, a dark green cloth cover, the spine worn pale from years of handling. I picked it up and held it against my chest for a moment, feeling its weight. Julian was sitting on the living room sofa when I passed through. His head was in his hands, his elbows on his knees, his shoulders rounded with the particular posture of a man who has run out of forward momentum. Sienna's bedroom door was closed. I stopped in the doorway. Julian looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. He had been crying or fighting the urge to, and neither option had resolved cleanly. He looked at me, then at the diary in my hands, then back at my face. Is that... His voice came out wrecked and small. Is that what was in the bag? Some of it, I said. He pressed his lips together hard. His chin trembled once before he controlled it. Dad, He stopped. Started again. I don't know what to... You don't have to say anything right now, I said. Not today. I walked to the front door and let myself out into the Naperville afternoon, the diary pressed against my ribs, the sound of my son's broken voice following me down the driveway, like something I would carry for a long time. The hotel room was very quiet at 9 in the evening. I had ordered room service soup bread, something simple, and eaten half of it, at the small table by the window, while the city lights of Chicago reflected off the surface of Lake Michigan in long, wavering columns. Then I pushed the tray aside and set the diary on the table in front of me. I had not opened it in 4 months. The last entry was dated early June, a Thursday night, written after Julian had called to cancel the Father's Day lunch we had tentatively planned. He had a work obligation. He was sorry. He would make it up soon. The entry was 3 sentences long, and I had not been able to write more than that. I opened the cover now. The first entry was dated 15 years ago, the week I moved into the attic. My handwriting then was steadier than it is now. The confident, even script of a man in his mid-50s who has not yet discovered that certainty is a renewable resource that requires constant replenishment. I read the first line aloud to the empty room because Margaret used to say that words written in private deserve to be heard at least once. Julian laughed at dinner tonight. A real laugh, not the polished one he uses at work. I missed that sound. My throat tightened. I kept reading. The early entries were careful, almost formal. The journal of a man who is not entirely sure he's made the right decision and is using the act of writing to test that uncertainty against the stated facts. I recorded small things. Julian shoveling snow from the driveway without being asked one January morning. Julian stopping his car in the middle of our block to help an elderly neighbor carry groceries up the porch steps. Julian one Sunday afternoon sitting at the kitchen table with his reading glasses on, frowning at a crossword puzzle with the same expression he'd worn at 8 years old working through long division. I had written, "He is still in there." 15 years of mornings, and I have never stopped writing that sentence. I turned pages. The handwriting changed as the years moved looser in the middle entries, where the hope was still substantial, tighter in the later ones, where it had begun to require more effort to maintain. I found the entry from 2 years ago, the week Julian received his promotion. He called this morning. His voice, I had forgotten what it sounded like when he was genuinely happy rather than performing happiness for an audience. He said "Dad" 3 times in the first 30 seconds. He said he'd worked for this. He said he knew I'd be proud. I told him I was. I am. I didn't tell him what I know about how that room was won. Some truths protect, and some truths only wound, and I have spent 15 years learning to distinguish between them. I told him I was proud. I am proud. The pride and the grief are not opposites. They live in the same room. My eyes burned so badly that I had to set the diary down and press the heels of both hands against them until the pressure gave me something to focus on other than the ache behind my sternum. I sat like that for a full minute. Then I picked the diary up again and turned to the last pages past the final written entry to the section in the back that I kept separate from the daily record. The pages that held the document I had drafted 3 years ago with my estate attorney and kept here because this room, this attic room, was the only place in the world that was entirely mine. The will, 2 copies folded together, the executed version with my signature, and 2 witnesses, and the working draft I had marked up privately over the years. I unfolded the executed copy and spread it flat on the table under the lamp. The relevant clause read as follows: "To my son Julian Alexander Vance, I bequeath 50% of all shares in Vance Global Holdings, including all subsidiary entities and associated assets, to be administered through a 10-year trust with quarterly distributions contingent upon active employment and annual review by the board. The remaining 50% to the Margaret Elaine Vance Educational Foundation in perpetuity." I read it twice. Then I picked up the pen from the hotel notepad on the bedside table. I did not cross out Julian's name. I had promised myself years ago that I would not make irreversible decisions in moments of acute pain, that anything this significant required the clarity that only distance provides. So I did not cross out his name. Instead, I wrote in the margin beside that clause in the small, deliberate handwriting of a man who is being very careful, pending. Review required. C. Gideon. I folded the document and set it back between the diary's final pages. Then I picked up my phone and called Gideon. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert, despite the hour he had never in 23 years failed to answer. "Ah, Gideon," I said. "I need you to prepare the amendment documents for the estate plan. All of them. I want to review the full structure with the estate attorney next week." A brief pause. "Sir, does this include the primary beneficiary clause?" My hand pressed flat against the diary cover. The green cloth was worn smooth at the center from years of my palm resting exactly there. "It includes everything," I said. "I haven't decided yet, but I need the documents ready so that when I do decide, I can act immediately." "Understood," Gideon said. "I'll have everything prepared by Wednesday morning." "One more thing." My voice dropped. "The diary. I have it." Another pause, this one softer, less professional. "Good," he said. And in that single word, in the particular warmth of it, I heard 23 years of loyalty and the kind of friendship that does not announce itself, but is simply, reliably there. I ended the call and sat in the quiet hotel room with the diary in my lap and the city breathing beyond the window. And I thought about Julian sitting on that sofa with his head in his hands. I thought about the entry from 15 years ago. He is still in there. 15 years of mornings, and that conviction had never once left me. But belief, I had learned, is not the same as certainty. And love, I had also learned, is not the same as permission. I closed the diary, turned off the lamp, and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to Chicago, its traffic, its distance, its enormous and indifferent continuation, and trying to find somewhere in the sound of it the difference between giving up and letting go. Monday arrived the way Mondays do after catastrophic weekends, without mercy and without ceremony. I was at my desk at the Vance Global offices on the 32nd floor of the Willis Tower by 7:15, which was earlier than necessary and later than I would have liked. The city spread below the windows in the flat gray light of an October morning, Lake Michigan, a dark smear at the eastern edge of the skyline. Gideon had left a fresh coffee on the corner of my desk and a manila folder containing the week's priority items. He had also, I noticed, placed a single sheet of paper on top, a printed news alert face down. I turned it over. The Chicago Tribune headline read, "Most Ungrateful Son in Chicago." Below it, a photograph taken from the viral clip, Julian, mid-sentence, finger pointed toward me. His face wearing the expression that had seemed in that moment like authority, and now read as something considerably less flattering. The article was 4 columns long. I read the first paragraph and set it aside. Gideon appeared in the doorway at 7:30, tablet in hand, his expression carrying the particular, careful neutrality of a man delivering a weather report about a storm he cannot stop. "Good morning, sir." He stepped inside and closed the door. "Shall I begin with Hartwell, or would you prefer the social media summary first?" "Hartwell," I said. He nodded and opened the tablet. Julian reported to the office at 8:45 this morning, approximately 40 minutes later than his standard arrival. He was met by the HR director and one of the managing partners within 15 minutes of arriving. He scrolled. The meeting lasted 22 minutes. He was informed that his position was being restructured, that the vice president role was being absorbed into a newly consolidated division, and that he was being offered a lateral transfer to a regional analyst position at a 30% salary reduction, which he refused. I said, "Not a question." Gideon looked up from the tablet. "How did you know, sir?" "Because Julian would rather lose the job than accept the demotion in front of the same people who watched him hold it." I picked up the coffee cup. He refused, and they parted ways. "Effective immediately," Gideon confirmed. The firm released a brief internal statement to staff citing restructuring. No mention of the Tribune article, no mention of Saturday's events. He set the tablet on the edge of my desk. However, 2 of the 3 partners who joined the Saturday event sent messages through the firm's general inquiry channel this morning, requesting that their names be removed from any future Hartwell marketing materials that reference the Julian Vance account relationship. The coffee was good. Gideon always found good coffee, I did not know how, and I held the warmth of the cup against my palm and breathed through the specific quality of pain that comes from watching a consequence you set in motion reach its destination. "Did I do this?" I asked. The question came out before I fully decided to ask it. Gideon set the tablet down completely. He was quiet for a moment, not the silence of someone without an answer, but the silence of someone choosing between several true ones. "Sir," he said finally, "you made one decision 15 years ago and you kept it faithfully. Julian made several hundred decisions in the years that followed." His voice was steady and without judgment. "The consequences belong to the decisions, not to the man who created the conditions they were made in. I looked at him. 23 years. 23 years of this man choosing every single day to be exactly what the job required, and considerably more than what it asked for. You should have been a philosopher, I said. I considered it, he said with the ghost of something that was not quite a smile, but was close enough. The pay was inadequate. I exhaled a sound that was almost a laugh, and not quite which was the closest I had managed in 2 days. What about the social media summary? He picked the tablet back up. Sienna's numbers have continued to move. 67,000 followers lost as of this morning. The pace has not slowed since Sunday. A fourth brand terminated publicly overnight. He turned the tablet toward me, showing a screenshot. Their statement was the most direct. They wrote, "We do not partner with individuals who publicly demean elderly family members or misrepresent luxury goods." He paused. It has been shared 40,000 times. I set the coffee cup down carefully. Gideon. My voice came out lower than intended. The men and women who attended Saturday's event, the investors, the fund directors. Do you know what they're saying? He picked up the manila folder and extracted a second sheet. Our external affairs team has been monitoring. The predominant narrative in those circles is he found the line he was looking for. That Julian Vance built his reputation on a borrowed name, and neither the borrowing nor the name has survived contact with the truth. He set the sheet down. Several of them have noted that Vivienne Montgomery's presence and her response to the evening appear to have been their word orchestrated. And what do they conclude from that? I asked. That you were making a point. Gideon met my gaze. And that the point was made. I looked out at the Chicago skyline, the gray October light laying itself flat across the city, the lake beyond it cold and enormous and permanent. I thought about Julian walking out of Hartwell Capital this morning. No briefcase probably, because the kind of exit that happens in 22 minutes doesn't allow for the collection of personal items, and walking to his car in the parking structure and sitting in the driver's seat and figuring out what came next. I thought about the entry in the diary. He is still in there. I have to believe that. Gideon, I said. His phone calls. How many? Gideon checked his own phone. 6 attempts to reach your direct line since this morning. 2 to the General Vance Global switchboard. He looked up. Shall I? No. My voice was firm. Not yet. I pressed my thumb against the edge of the desk hard until I felt the pressure in the joint. But keep a record of every attempt. Time duration, any messages left. Of course. Gideon made a note. And the documents for the estate review the attorney has confirmed Wednesday morning at 9. I nodded. Outside, a cloud moved across the October sun, and the light in the office shifted dimmer, cooler. The particular quality of autumn light that has always made me think of things ending. One more thing, I said. The house. Gideon straightened slightly. The Naperville property. Yes. I looked at him steadily. Prepare the notice. Standard 30-day per Illinois residential tenancy law. I want it delivered personally by you, not a courier. Something moved across his face, a brief, controlled expression that acknowledged the weight of what he'd been asked to do without flinching from it. Understood, sir. I'll go Tuesday morning. I turned back to the window. The cloud had passed. The light returned flat and honest and cold. Thank you, Gideon, I said. For all of it. He picked up the folder and the tablet and moved toward the door. At the threshold, he paused. Sir. His voice was quieter. For what it's worth, I believe the decision you made 15 years ago came from love, not from strategy. He held my gaze for one beat. That matters. Even when the outcome is painful, that matters. He closed the door behind him. I sat alone in the 32nd floor office in the city I had built a life in and pressed my hand flat against the surface of my desk, the solid, real, unambiguous surface of it, and tried to locate somewhere beneath the grief and the certainty and the long exhaustion of the right decision something that felt like peace. I found the edges of it, not the whole thing, but enough. Gideon called me at 11:15 Tuesday morning. I was in a meeting quarterly projections Pacific Rim Division, and I excused myself the moment I saw his name on the screen. Gideon did not call during scheduled meetings unless the matter required it. "I've just left Naperville," he said. His voice was steady, but beneath the steadiness I heard something I rarely detected in him, the controlled residue of an experience that had cost something to witness. I stepped into the corridor and pulled the conference room door closed behind me. "Tell me." "I arrived at 9:05, Gideon said. Julian answered the door. He was... A brief pause, the kind that chooses words carefully. "He was not what I expected, sir." He looked as though he hadn't slept. His shirt was untucked. There was a coffee mug in his hand that he kept turning over and over like he'd forgotten it was there. I leaned against the corridor wall and closed my eyes briefly. "I presented the formal notice," Gideon continued. "Illinois Residential Tenancy Act, Section 9207.5 30-day notice to vacate based on lease termination, at the request of the property owner Vance Global Holdings, LLC, all required disclosures included. Delivered in writing with a signed receipt." He paused. Julian took the envelope. He looked at it for a long moment without opening it. Then he said... Another pause. He said, "Is this really the house my father owns?" Something cracked open in the center of my chest. "And you told him," I said. "I told him the property has been held under Vance Global Holdings since the original construction permit was filed in 2009, Gideon said. That the occupancy arrangement was structured as a residential lease at a nominal rate of $1 per year renewable annually at the owner's discretion. He cleared his throat. He asked me why his father had structured it that way. Gideon's voice was very careful now. I told him that was a question only you could answer. I pressed my free hand flat against the corridor wall, the cool, smooth plaster of it, and breathed. "How did he respond?" I asked. "He opened the envelope," Gideon said. "He read the notice once. Then he sat down right there on the front porch step, still in the open doorway, and he put his face in his hands." A pause. "He didn't make a sound, sir, but his shoulders were shaking. I stood there for approximately 90 seconds before deciding whether to stay or go." "What did you decide?" "I stayed," Gideon said simply. I thought someone should stay." My throat was so tight I had to press my lips together and breathe through my nose for a full 3 seconds before I could speak again. "Go on." After approximately 2 minutes, he looked up. Gideon continued. His eyes were, he had been crying. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and stood up, and he said, Gideon's voice shifted, the careful recitation of a man who has committed something to memory because he understood it would matter. He said, 15 years. My father lived in the attic of his own house for 15 years, and I never once asked him why. The sound I made was not a word. He said it very quietly. Gideon added, "Not to me. I don't think he was speaking to me at all." I turned and faced the corridor wall and pressed my forehead against the cool plaster, and stayed there for a moment, letting the cold of it anchor me while the grief moved through my chest in a slow, enormous wave that I had not given it permission to make. Gideon. My voice came out wrecked and rough. What happened after? Sienna came to the door, Gideon said. She had clearly heard the exchange through the front window. She looked at the notice in Julian's hand and her face. He chose his words carefully. She looked at it the way someone looks at a document they've been anticipating. Not shocked, calculating. I straightened up from the wall and wiped my eyes with the back of my wrist, one quick, hard motion. She asked me directly. Gideon continued. Whether the notice applied to both occupants or could be contested by one party independently. I told her that any questions regarding the legal instrument should be directed to our attorney's office. She nodded. He paused. Then she went back inside and closed the door, and Julian was left standing on the porch alone holding the envelope. I could picture it precisely, my son, on the front porch of the house that had never been his, holding a piece of paper that formalized everything he was losing in the gray October light of a Tuesday morning. He asked to see me, Gideon said. Before I left, he asked if he could speak with you, not at the office, not through a lawyer. He said, a brief pause. He said, just as his son, not as anything else. The words hit me somewhere behind the sternum, in the specific place where the oldest pain lives. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him I would pass the message along, Gideon said, and that I could not speak on your behalf. He paused. Was that correct, sir? I looked down at the floor of the corridor, the commercial carpet, the fluorescent light, the ordinary, unremarkable surface of a hallway, in a building where I had made 1,000 decisions, and I felt the full weight of this one pressing down on me. Yes, I said. That was correct. A silence stretched between us, not empty, but full the way silence is full between people who understand each other. John, I said finally. One last thing. When he said it about the attic. 15 years his father in his own house. My voice barely held its shape. Did he seem like a man performing remorse, or did he seem... He seemed, Gideon said without hesitation, like a man who has just understood something for the first time and does not yet know what to do with it. I closed my eyes. Thank you, I said. Go home. Take the afternoon. I ended the call and stood alone in the corridor for a long time, my phone in my hand, the conference room door closed behind me, the meeting continuing without me on the other side of it. Somewhere across the city, my son was standing on the porch of a house that was not his, and I was standing in a hallway, trying to decide whether the man Gideon had just described was the boy I had spent 15 years waiting to find again. I was not ready to answer that question, but for the first time in 2 days, I was not certain the answer was no. The message from Gideon arrived on a Wednesday morning at the end of October, while I was reviewing shipping manifests from our Rotterdam office. It was not a call, just a text, 3 lines, which told me the information was factual and complete, and did not require the buffer of a human voice to deliver it. Sienna Vance vacated the Naperville property yesterday. Julian confirmed this morning when he called the main line. There is more. Call when available. I set the phone face down on my desk, looked at the Rotterdam manifests for approximately 4 seconds without reading them, and then picked the phone back up. Gideon answered before the first ring completed. Sir. Tell me, I said. He exhaled the controlled exhale of a man organizing information into the most useful sequence. Julian called the switchboard at 8:50 this morning. He asked for you directly. When I took the call, he told me Sienna left the previous morning, Tuesday, while he was out. He came home to an apartment that had been selectively emptied. A pause. The items she took were specific. Her personal wardrobe, her jewelry, her electronics. The kitchen was untouched. The furniture was untouched. His voice was careful. She left one item behind deliberately. A handwritten note on the kitchen counter. My hand tightened around the phone. What did it say? Gideon read it from his notes, his voice neutral and precise. You're not the man you pretended to be. The sentence landed in the room and stayed there. I pressed my free hand flat against my thigh and breathed through the particular quality of pain that comes from hearing words directed at your child. Words that are true and terrible precisely because they are true, and delivered by someone who chose the most efficient blade available. The Swiss account, I said. Collapsed, Gideon said. The individual she intended to transfer assets to the intermediary she had been cultivating for several months was the subject of a federal fraud investigation that became public last week. The account was frozen by order of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois as part of a broader asset recovery action. He paused. The funds Sienna had been moving into that account over the past 8 months, approximately $240,000, are currently inaccessible pending the outcome of the investigation. $240,000. 8 months of careful, structured transfers, each one engineered to stay below the $10,000 Bank Secrecy Act, reporting threshold, each one building toward an exit she had been planning since before she put the phone in Julian's hand on the driveway. Where is she now? I asked. Her parents' home in Evanston, Gideon said. She arrived there Tuesday evening with 2 suitcases. Her mother confirmed this to a mutual acquaintance who contacted our external affairs team. He cleared his throat. She has retained a divorce attorney. The filing is expected within the week. I looked out the window at the October sky, the particular gray of late autumn in Chicago, the color of something that has given up pretending to be summer. And Julian. My voice came out rougher than I intended. How did he sound when he called? Gideon was quiet for a moment, the quiet of someone who is about to say something that costs them something to say. He chose the word carefully. Emptied. Not angry, not dramatic. Just emptied the way a room sounds after someone has removed everything from it. Another pause. He asked me one question before he ended the call. What question? He asked whether you knew about Sienna's plan, the account, the timeline. Gideon's voice was very careful. He asked whether you had known all along what she was doing. My chest constricted sharply, a sudden specific tightening that radiated up into my throat. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him the truth, Gideon said. That you had been informed approximately 6 weeks ago by a source and that you made no use of the information and took no action against Sienna based on it. A pause. He was quiet for a long time after that. I imagine he was, I said. I thought about Julian in whatever apartment he had found some rented space in the city. Unfamiliar walls, unfamiliar sounds, the specific disorientation of a man who has lost his job, his home, his wife, and his certainty about who his father is, all within the span of 6 weeks. I thought about him standing in an emptied kitchen, holding a handwritten note from a woman who had been calculating her exit since before the damage was visible. And I thought about what Gideon had said about him on that Naperville porch, shoulders shaking, not making a sound, saying to the October air, 15 years. My father lived in the attic of his own house, and I never once asked him why. Gideon, I said. His messages, the call attempts. 14 total since Saturday, Gideon said. He has not left voicemails after the first 2. The last attempt was this morning at 7:43. 7:43. The same time I realized with a jolt that moved through me like cold water that the Escalades had arrived on the night of the party. I did not know whether that was coincidence or whether Julian had noticed the parallel himself. I suspected he had. I set the phone down on my desk for a moment and looked at my hands. These 70-year-old hands that had built a company and kept a promise and held a broken bag and carried a diary across 15 years of mornings that had never quite managed to become what I had hoped they would be. I picked the phone back up. "Gideon," I said, "arrange a meeting, not here, not at the office, not at the hotel." I thought for a moment. Lincoln Park, the coffee shop on Fullerton, the independent one across from the conservatory. Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. A brief pause. Shall I inform Julian directly or through an intermediary? Directly, I said. Tell him to come alone. Tell him I will come alone. I paused. And tell him. My voice caught slightly on the next words, and I let it catch because some things should not be delivered in a voice that has been entirely composed. Tell him I said yes. Gideon's voice when he answered was the warmest I had heard it in 23 years. Yes, sir, he said. I'll tell him. I arrived at the coffee shop on Fullerton 14 minutes early. Not strategy habit. 50 years of arriving before the meeting starts, because the minutes before a difficult conversation are the ones you use to decide who you intend to be inside it. The owner, Carl, set a black coffee in front of me without being asked. I found the corner table facing the park and sat down with both hands wrapped around the cup, watching the conservatory across the street do its quiet autumn business. Julian arrived at 10 exactly. I heard the door before I saw him, the hesitation in the push of it, the particular sound of someone entering a space they are not certain they deserve. He was wearing a dark jacket and plain jeans. No watch, no leather portfolio. None of the professional armor he had spent 15 years assembling. He looked older than 42. He also looked underneath the exhaustion and the shadows around his eyes more genuinely himself than he had in years. He sat down across from me. He wrapped both hands around the coffee Carl brought him, looked at the table and said, his voice low and scraped raw. I rehearsed this 12 different ways. How many of them started with an apology? I asked. He looked up. His eyes were red at the rims from accumulated sleeplessness. All of them. He pressed his lips together hard. I'm sorry, Dad. His voice broke cleanly on the second word. He pressed his fist against his mouth, breathed through his nose, and tried again. I am so sorry for what I did, for what I said, for all of it. I looked at my son across the small table and felt the grief and the love move through me at the same time, not canceling each other, just existing together the way they always had. Tell me what you understand, I said. Not what you're sorry for. What you actually understand. Julian lowered his fist. His jaw worked. I understand that I treated you like furniture, he said. Like something present that didn't require thought. His voice cracked on the last word. I understand you had a reason for being there, a real reason, and I never once asked what it was. He looked directly at me and the eye contact cost him something visible. I never asked because I decided you weren't worth my curiosity. And that... His voice broke completely. Tears ran down his face in 2 straight lines that he didn't wipe away. That is what I cannot get past. My own eyes burned deep and relentless. I blinked hard twice before I trusted myself to speak. You were afraid, I said. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth. He shook his head sharply, a self-condemning motion. Don't make it easier than it deserves to be. I'm not, I said. Fear that turns into contempt is not a small thing. I'm not minimizing it. I leaned forward. But I also made choices that widened the distance between us. Your mother asked me not to tell you too soon about the money. She was afraid of what it would do to you. I paused. She was right about some of it, and I held on to her instruction longer than was wise. Julian's breath hitched. She asked you to hide it. She asked me to wait, I said. I waited too long. He pressed both palms flat on the table, a gesture I recognized with a jolt, like cold water, identical to one of my own. Why didn't you say something? When things got bad, when I started being, why didn't you just tell me? Because every time I was close, I said I would see something, some small thing that told me you were still in there. My voice dropped. One January morning, you shoveled the driveway without being asked. One afternoon, you stopped your car to help a neighbor carry groceries. One night, my throat tightened. One night, you knocked on the attic door and asked if I was warm enough. Julian's face crumpled entirely. He pressed both hands over his face, and his shoulders shook with something enormous working its way through him. I remember that night, he said from behind his hands. I'd had a terrible week. I thought he's up there alone, and I never... He lowered his hands. His face was wet and stripped of everything except what was actually there. I almost talked myself out of it. I know, I said. I heard you at the bottom of the stairs for 2 minutes before you knocked. Something broke open in his expression, grief and recognition together. You heard me. The fourth step creaks, I said. I never fixed it. Fresh tears rolled down his face. He reached up and wiped them with the back of his wrist, one hard, quick motion, then looked at me with red-rimmed eyes that were steadier than they had been since he walked in. Dad. His voice was barely above a whisper. Is it too late? I looked at my son, Margaret's cheekbones, my stubbornness, 15 years of choices that had brought us to this small table on a November morning, and felt the answer form in something older than words. It is not too late, I said. But it is not simple. What comes next depends entirely on who you decide to be. I held his gaze. Not for me. For yourself. He nodded, slow and deliberate, the nod of a man receiving something that will take a long time to fully absorb. His hands were still trembling slightly around the coffee cup. Then he looked up, eyes wet but steadier, and said, There's something I need to tell you. The press conference, the interview before the foundation handover. He held my gaze. Whatever you say, Dad, say the truth. All of it. He swallowed hard. I can take it. I need to be able to take it. I looked at him for a long moment. I know you can, I said. He pressed his lips together. His chin trembled once. Then something settled behind his eyes, quiet and resolute, a door closing on the man he had been, and opening very carefully onto someone he had not yet become. We sat together while the city moved around us, and the conservatory stood green and permanent across the street. And for the first time in 15 years, the space between us felt like something that could, with enough time and enough honesty, become something other than distance. The green room of the television studio smelled of fresh coffee and hairspray, and the particular anxiety of people who are about to say things on camera that cannot be unsaid. I sat in the makeup chair and let a young woman named Patricia dust powder across my forehead while I looked at my own reflection in the brightly lit mirror. 70 years old. The lines in my face had deepened in the past 3 months, in ways I could track precisely. Grief does that, I have found. It leaves marks the way weather leaves marks on stone. Not destruction, just evidence of time and pressure honestly recorded. You doing okay? Patricia asked. Her voice was kind and completely professional. She had probably prepared 100 people for cameras that would expose them. I've had harder mornings, I said. She smiled. That's either very reassuring or very alarming. Probably both, I said. Gideon knocked and entered, tablet in hand. He closed the door behind him and looked at me in the mirror. 5 minutes, sir. The anchor is Rebecca Holt, 22 years at the station. Straightforward fare, does not sensationalize. He paused. She will ask about Julian. We confirmed that in the pre-interview briefing. I know, I said. Sir. His voice dropped. You don't have to answer everything. I met his eyes in the mirror. Yes, I said. I do. He held my gaze for one beat, then nodded. Once the nod of a man who has learned when to stop arguing and when to simply stand beside someone. He left without another word. Patricia finished and stepped back. I looked at the reflection, this old man in a charcoal suit, the Vance Global lapel pin on his left lapel, the photograph of Margaret folded in his breast pocket, the way it had been every day for 16 years. You look like someone who knows what he's about to say, Patricia offered. I do, I said. That's the easy part. The studio was cold and bright, the particular aggressive brightness of television lighting that leaves nothing soft. Rebecca Holt was exactly what Gideon had described. Measured, intelligent, the kind of interviewer who listens to your actual answer, rather than preparing her next question while you speak. We covered 40 minutes of straightforward ground the foundation handover. The legacy of Vance Global, 50 years of building something from nothing. Then she looked down at her notes. When she looked back up, her expression had shifted, not unkind, but direct. The shift of a professional moving from the prepared material to the thing the audience actually came to hear. Mr. Vance, she said, there's been significant public discussion about your decision to exclude your son from the inheritance. The foundation transfer, the estate restructuring, many people see this as a punishment. She held my gaze steadily. Do you regret it? The studio went very quiet. I looked at Rebecca Holt, and then past her at the camera at the red light that meant every word I said was going somewhere I could not retrieve it from. I thought about Julian sitting in whatever room he was watching from. I thought about what he had said at the coffee shop. Whatever you say the truth. All of it. I can take it. I thought about Margaret. I looked back into the camera. He thinks, I said, what he lost today was $1 billion inheritance. I paused. Let the sentence stand alone. But that's not what he lost. Another pause. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. What he lost, I said, was the only person in this world who was willing to love him when he had nothing. Rebecca Holt did not speak immediately. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. I counted them before she gathered herself and said quietly, Can you explain what you mean by that? I said, that money is not what I withheld from my son. I withheld nothing from him that mattered. My voice was steady, steadier than I had expected, the steadiness of a man who has finally arrived at the sentence he has been building toward for 15 years. What I gave him, what I tried to give him, was 40 years of unconditional love, from a father who showed up every day, who kept every promise, who stayed when staying was the hardest available option. I felt the burn begin behind my eyes and did not blink it away this time. He didn't lose wealth. He lost the person who would have loved him through anything. My voice cracked on the last word, just slightly, just enough. And I genuinely hope that he finds his way back to understanding the difference. Rebecca Holt's eyes were bright. She cleared her throat once. And if he does find his way back. I looked into the camera and thought of a boy asking if his father was warm enough, standing at the bottom of a creaking staircase in the dark. Then nothing will have been lost permanently, I said. Only temporarily. And temporarily is something a person can work with. The interview ended. The lights went down by degrees. I walked out of the studio and Gideon was waiting as he always was. He handed me my coat without speaking. I put it on. We walked toward the exit, and just before we reached the door, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text. From Julian's number, 3 words. I heard you. My hand tightened around the phone. My eyes burned until they were wet, and I let them be wet standing in the corridor of a television studio in Chicago on a late November afternoon, holding 3 words from my son like they were something breakable and irreplaceable. Because they were. I did not text back. Not yet. Some answers need more than 3 words, and I was not going to rush the one I owed him. But I held the phone the entire way to the car. The plane lifted off O'Hare at 7:15 in the morning on the 3rd of December, 2025. I watched Chicago disappear through the window, the grid of streets contracting, the dark ribbon of Lake Michigan thinning to a line, the skyline folding into something small, and then into nothing at all, and felt for the first time in a period I could not accurately measure the particular lightness of a man who has set something down after carrying it an enormous distance. Not relief, something quieter than relief. Something that did not have a clean word in English, which I had always found to be a language that named everything except the most important things. Gideon had walked me to the gate. He had stood there with his leather folio under his arm and his hands clasped in front of him, and he had looked at me with the expression of a man doing something that costs him something, which was watching a person he has protected and served for 23 years walk through a gate without him. "You'll call," he said. Not a question. The kind of statement people make when they need to hear the answer regardless. "Every week," I said. "Without fail. And if something requires your attention at the company, Houghton." "It won't," I said. "That's precisely the point, Gideon." I looked at him steadily. "You have been running Vance Global for 20 years. I've been sitting in an attic pretending otherwise." Something cracked open briefly in his expression. A flash of emotion he gathered and controlled before it became visible the way he gathered and controlled most things that mattered to him. His chin lifted. His shoulders straightened by a degree that was barely perceptible and somehow said everything. "It has been," he said, his voice lower than usual, "the honor of my professional life, sir." My throat tightened until speaking became an act of will. I pressed his hand, held it for a full 3 seconds, which was 3 seconds longer than I would have held anyone else's, and then let go. "Take care of the company," I said, "and take care of yourself. In that order, no the other order." He almost smiled. 23 years, and that almost smile had always been enough. I walked through the gate and did not look back, because looking back at Gideon standing there would have made leaving significantly harder, and I had decided that leaving was the right thing, and I did not want to argue with myself about it at gate G14. Now, somewhere above the middle of the country, the patchwork of America moving below me in the early December light farmland river systems, the geometry of towns that existed entirely outside the world I had spent 50 years inhabiting. I allowed myself to think about Julian. 3 days before departure, Gideon had sent a report. Not requested. Offered with the quiet judgment of a man who understood what information his employer needed, even when his employer had not known to ask for it. Julian had started a new position at a freight logistics firm on the north side of Chicago. 40 employees. Regional operations. His title was account manager. The salary was a number that 2 years ago he would have been embarrassed to say aloud in the circles he had been moving in. He had applied under his own name. He had interviewed twice. He had been offered the role because of his performance in those interviews, not because of anything attached to the name Vance, because he had not mentioned it, and because the hiring manager had not recognized it. His own name, Julian First. The rest of it left at the door. I had read that report 3 times, and each time the thing that happened in my chest was not pride, exactly. It was something more fundamental than pride. Something that lived underneath pride, the way a foundation lives underneath a building. The recognition of a person choosing for the first time to find out who they actually are. I reached into my jacket and found Margaret's photograph. I did not take it out. I just pressed my hand flat over the breast pocket and held it there, the slight rectangular resistance of it against my palm, and looked out at the sky. "He's going to be all right," I told her quietly. "Not yet, but the direction has changed." That's what matters first, the direction. The man in the seat beside me glanced over with the brief polite assessment of a fellow traveler, deciding whether intervention was required, concluded it was not, and returned to his newspaper. I appreciated him for it. Privacy is one of the genuine luxuries of air travel, and I had always valued it accordingly. I took out the diary. The green cloth cover was worn smooth at the center, from 15 years of my palm resting exactly there, a topography of habit, of the particular comfort of holding something that has held your most honest thoughts. I turned to the last page, the blank one, the one I had been saving without understanding that I was saving it until I reached it and understood. I uncapped the pen. For a long moment, I held the pen above the page and let the words find their own order, the way the best sentences always do when you stop trying to write them and simply listen for them instead. Then I wrote, "The story isn't over. It's just beginning again." I looked at it. Then I wrote beneath it in smaller, quieter letters, "He is still in there." I always knew it. And beneath that, after a pause that lasted the length of time it takes to decide whether a thing needs to be written or whether it only needs to be felt. "Margaret, you were right about most of it, but you were wrong about one thing. The money didn't make him into someone we wouldn't recognize. The money just made it take longer for him to find out who he already was. He knows now. He's looking." I capped the pen. I closed the diary. I held it in my lap with both hands and looked out the window at the country moving below, enormous and various and full of people, living their ordinary, irreplaceable lives, none of them aware of the old man in seat 4A who was feeling for the first time in 15 years something that did not require him to manage it. The flight attendant came by. She was young, efficient, with the practiced warmth of someone who has learned to read passengers accurately in the first 30 seconds. "Can I get you anything?" she asked. "Coffee," I said. "Black. And..." I paused. "What's the weather like in Tokyo this time of year?" She brightened. "Cold but beautiful." "Have you been before?" "No," I said. And I found to my mild surprise that saying the word gave me something close to joy. "That's rather the point." She brought the coffee and moved on. I accepted the cup with both hands and held the warmth of it against my palms. Those 70-year-old hands that had signed contracts and kept promises and carried a broken canvas bag and held a photograph every day for 16 years, and I let the warmth spread through my fingers and up into my wrists. Below me, Chicago was 300 miles behind and growing smaller by the minute. Somewhere in that city, in a North Side apartment that was modest and genuinely his, my son was waking up on a December morning and going to a job he had earned and carrying a name he was finally learning to inhabit on his own terms. It was not a happy ending. It was better than that. It was a real beginning, the kind that costs something, which is the only kind that holds. The sky outside the window was blue without interruption. In every direction, I could see the particular blue of altitude in December, and the world seen from a distance sufficient to understand its actual shape. I pressed my hand once more over the breast pocket where Margaret's photograph lived. Then I leaned back in seat 4A, closed my eyes, and let Chicago go. If there is one thing this story taught me, it is this: the most expensive thing a person can lose has no price tag. It cannot be deposited, transferred, or recovered in a courtroom. It is the quiet, steady love of someone who chose to stay when every reasonable person would have left. I was not a perfect father. I held a promise so tightly that I forgot a son needs more than protection, he needs presence. If you see yourself in Julian, I am asking you directly, do not wait. Do not let ambition build a wall so high that by the time you think to look over it, the person who loved you most has already learned to live without being seen. Do not become so focused on impressing the world that you forget to know the people standing inside your own door. And if you see yourself in me, speak sooner. Love without honesty is not protection. It is simply a slower kind of distance. I have come to believe that God does not waste our pain. He uses it to strip away everything that was never real and leave behind only what was always true. That is what family justice truly means to me. Not punishment. Not a revenge dad settling scores. But a father who loved his son enough to let the consequences be honest. Because real family justice is not about winning. It is about what remains when the anger is gone. A revenge dad who leads with love will always outlast a son who leads with pride. That, I believe, is the story worth telling. If this moved something in, you leave a comment and tell me which moment stayed with you longest. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe to this channel because what comes next, I promise, is worth staying for. Thank you from the bottom of this old man's heart for walking this road with me until the very end. The stories on this channel are works of fiction crafted to illuminate something true about the human experience. If this is not the kind of content you are seeking, we wish you well and hope you find exactly what you need elsewhere.